welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the Woods Collab. So Michael and I are here to collab once again and talk about some very important topics because we are very focused on helping ourselves, helping others to be their best selves in every situation, whether it's personally or professionally. And so that's what we're gonna dig in today. We're gonna dig into all those things, and we did something a little bit unusual this time. We asked that folks would respond to a topic that we should talk about today. And so today we are going to talk about feedback. So yes, we're going to talk about feedback. So if that is something you want to learn more about, you want to hear us talk about, you want to talk about with us, let us know. But we are going to ask that you like and subscribe to our videos so that you're always aware of when new content is coming your way. All right, so feedback. Mike, so I want to hear from you. What is your thought around feedback? What is feedback in your opinion?
Feedback. That's a good one. That's a good one. So feedback is one of those things that we could definitely use to our advantage in any relationship, professionally, personal, all that good stuff. But feedback for me is simple. It's a perspective. I know we kind of talked about that in the pregame session. It's a perspective, it's thought, it's insight, it's someone telling you or about yourself or talking about a situation from their perspective, giving an opinion.
Yeah, an opinion. That is very interesting. And I do like to use the term perspective when I think about feedback, because even if we have one object in front of us, right? And you're looking at, let's say, my hands from this side, and I'm looking at my hand from this side, we see two different things.
That's true.
And as human beings, we have two different ways of viewing things, the ways that we look at things. And so it's okay for me to find out from you what you see out of the same situation. And the same for me, right? And so what I like to do is when I think about feedback is perspective sharing. And that doesn't mean we're going to agree with what you see, because I may say, nope, it's green. You might say it's purple, which we disagree about colors a lot because, you know, I think my husband is struggling in that area of coordination and colors.
Not true.
Very true.
Bad feedback.
And in feedback, I think that's funny that you say that, but there can be bad feedback, and I think that that happens sometimes. And so people shy away from receiving feedback sometimes, but people also shy away from giving it. So why do you think people shy away from giving feedback?
There's times where it's not comfortable. There's some discomfort in it where, first off, I've benefited a lot from feedback. A lot from feedback, especially when it's something that resonates and you're like, hey, you know what? Here's an opportunity. And just like you said, with that perspective, if I'm not seeing that perspective, but somebody bring that to my attention, I'm like, okay, cool. That was good feedback. However, it takes a bit of courage. It takes a bit of care and passion to give it to others. I know we've talked about before about the whole spinach in the teeth thing, where you're talking to somebody and they have something in their teeth. Like some people would be like, just let you keep talking just so they can get those points out. But others who are confident or courageous or just say, hey, you know what, this is my brand, I'm going to tell you about yourself.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately people shy away from it because it's a couple of different reasons. One, if you don't care, if you don't care about something, you're not going to invest the time and effort and energy to tell someone else about something that you don't care about, because you're thinking like, hey, I'm not invested in this. Let me just go about my business.
Yeah.
That discomfort is real. So when you're talking to somebody and you have to tell somebody about themselves or something that they're very passionate about, sometimes we might create the story in our head and say, who am I to challenge that thing or that person? Maybe it's a little bit easier if I just don't say anything and I'll just kind of deal with it. But I think for the most part, you don't care or it's that discomfort. What do you think?
Everything you just said, right? I think about the what's in it for me. And that's the term we use a lot. Like, what's the with them? What's in it for me? But a lot of people don't, to your point, see the importance of what's in it for me if I tell this person that they have spinach in their teeth, right? At the end of the day, I'm still going to be me. I'm still going to do my thing. And it's not going to help me if I tell them. And so even with feedback that's outside of something like that, if it's a work project, if it's a peer, if it's a leader that you have, if I tell you this thing, my perspective, if I share my perspective on it, what's in it for me, And so how is that going to benefit me at all? And it's easier for me to walk away from this situation and do what I need to do, but not really understand that there's value in sharing my perspective with you. And so to your point, not being invested in others, I think is a big piece of it. But sometimes people just have stank attitudes when you give them feedback, right? And it might not even be that they have had a bad attitude or responded poorly to you, but you may have seen that their leader has given them feedback and they got the eye roll going and they are like, what does she think? Who does she think she is? Or who do he think he is? That type of thing. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking to yourself, well, they got a good point, right? Like they hit that nail on the head. And so when you see people resist feedback like that or have a bad attitude about it, or maybe you've given them the feedback before and you know that it's been awkward since, right. Then that's probably going to stop you from wanting to provide that feedback to them in the future.
Now, how do you get to a point where because sometimes if you work with others, whatever the scenario is, whether or not you're in leadership or you aspire to be in leadership or you're not in leadership, but you show up and you just show up to do your thing and you out of there. Mm-hmm. You literally say, hey, you know what? I'm here to do ABC. After ABC, I'm out. Mm-hmm. Who cares about this thing? Who cares about my opinion or my insight? So how do you cross that threshold where now you're in a space where this is a part of who I am, where I'm sharing that perspective, I'm sharing that feedback, I'm giving it?
Yeah, and so going back to the Woods Senate for me, I think that you grow when you're able to learn how to provide feedback in a positive, productive way. You're able to grow yourself, but not only that, you help to grow the people around you. But I remember there were times where I didn't want to give feedback on things before I was able to grow in this skill, and I would have a teammate who would jack something up. I would get it. I would spend an extra 20, 30 minutes fixing it. And then I would send it over to the next person, right? Kind of like that assembly line when you're working on projects. And if I had just taken that time to share that perspective, then I would have saved myself some time, right? And then I could have maybe potentially helped that person to grow. But then we go into that, we want to fix it ourselves because it's just easier than just saying what we see. And then that's a problem. And so those moments happen. Going back to the spinach and the teeth piece, right? People are going to have that aha moment when they realize that the spinach is there. Right. And they're going to say, I talked to Mike Woods for 35 minutes and he didn't say a thing.
Yep.
I don't trust him. True. And so if you're working on projects with people, if you're presenting information to people, if you're collaborating and these things are happening and no one ever says anything to you, when someone finally does honor you with the truth, you're going to know that you spent years working with a particular person and then they didn't provide the feedback. So even if it's peer-to-peer, even if you're in hey, I'm in a moment where I want to just sit in where I sit and do what I need to do, and at the end of the day, it doesn't impact me, it does impact you. Whether it's you spending more of that mental energy, whether it's you avoiding people at work because now they said something that rubs you the wrong way and now you just want to avoid them. Right. All of that requires energy from you.
Right. Yeah, it also goes with taking advantage of the opportunity to use your voice. I feel that we're all capable of having a perspective and insight that is just unique to the world, unique to humanity. We all have different experiences. Sharing our voice is very important. So that's why I feel it's important. It's like you could be in a grocery store. You could be in a grocery store, you could be at work, at your place of business. If you have something to say, why not say it? Because there's power in the voices that we've been granted. There's power in our experiences. There's power in our perspectives. There's power in the way that we see things. So I encourage everybody just to take advantage of using that voice. Now, that could be interpreted with like, all right, cool. Well, I'm about to go out and say anything I need to say. Hey, grocery store, y'all too slow. That's a fact at times. You go to the grocery store, for those of you that don't use the delivery services. Hey, look, you all need to get some more lanes open. So you have to be tactful and mindful. So with that, if the notion is to give feedback, is to share that perspective, to share that voice, what would you say is the best way to give feedback or the best type of feedback?
So I'm going to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago. What story are you telling yourself in your head? That was probably one of the things I struggled with providing feedback is that before I even told the person, I would already have it play out, and we were scrapping.
So this is something that you wanted to say.
Yes.
But you're visualizing you're creating a story, this narrative of how it could go if you say this thing and tell this person about themselves. Talk about
it always ended bad. It was always, we would yell, we would scream, we would talk to each other, it'd be awkward, I'd avoid them. Like, it was all the worst case scenarios. And then over time, I started to realize when I did have the courage, right? When I was providing that courageous feedback, it was never as bad as I thought it would be. And I think that part of that was, for me, it was just, if it was to the point where I needed to provide the feedback, it was like a had to happen situation. Especially when I was in leadership previously, it was okay, my leader has told me I need to say something. So that this has to go down today. Right. And so I'm going to say it, and I sweat a little bit, and I get into that space, and then I say the thing, and the person's like, oh, wow, okay, thank you. Or I needed to know this.
Right.
And so then I'm like, okay, so maybe I'm telling myself this story, and it's not a true narrative.
Yeah.
And so I think the first thing is, when you're building up the courageous feedback, is to make sure you are not telling yourself a false story in your mind before you go into that conversation. What are some things you would do before you go into a courageous conversation? Yeah,
I agree with make sure you're not telling yourself a false story. Or if you do find yourself in that place, to have that awareness of it. I know a couple of episodes ago, we talked about having that self-awareness, but be aware. Like, hey, okay, I'm making this up. I don't have any facts to back up this thing. And then you have to check yourself and move along from that. Also, I think it's important to give that feedback. I'm a fan of direct feedback. Like, hey, Woods, you got spinach in your teeth. Cool, thanks for telling me. I don't need as much of a build-up.
Hey, Michael, how are you feeling today? Oh my goodness, you have amazing teeth. What will make your teeth even better?
Take the spinach out.
Get the spinach.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think that's important as well. But also realize that what could lead up to that. So I think one method is to be authentic in that. So people can see if you're coming from a sincere place. And that could be somebody that you might not even communicate with a lot. But if you're coming from, I think that the energy that you bring to the table, it makes a difference. So if we're working together for a year and I never speak to you, I always walk past you. I don't say hello. I don't say goodbye. I don't say anything. I'm short with you. And if you have some feedback at a year later after that, your reputation has already been established that you don't even see me enough to speak to me. Okay. So now
presence.
Goes back to presence. So now that feedback, I might look at it and say, well, I'm not really sure if that's coming from a sincere place.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that relationship can't be mended, but that's perspective that's going to go into the table. That's something we need to be aware of. I need to go in and know that I'm about to give you feedback, even though I just walk past you every day. I gotta think of that, because it could be something that you need, but also got to realize, like, I don't even talk to this person. I don't even show a level of respect for this person. So being sincere, but at the same time, does that mean that you have to have this long relationship with someone before you can give feedback? The answer to that is no. That's why I believe that it's like the energy that you bring to the table. It could be somebody that you just met.
Yeah.
But if you met, let's say you at somewhere getting coffee, it's in the office or at a coffee shop, whatever the case may be, and you say, hey, heads up, you have something on your shoe. If you're literally coming from a sincere place, that's how it's going to help you to get that message across. So in addition to what you said about, of course, being direct, being authentic, and being sincere, those are methods that can help you to get that feedback across.
Yeah, I think a relationship is really important, but I don't think feedback should suffer because of the relationship.
Right.
And I mean, in our situation, if we have a person on our team tomorrow who's a brand new team member, we're going to still provide them the feedback that they need. We're going to honor them with the truth, and we're not going to say, well, I'm going to let them do it 15 more times before I actually say something. And so I've had situations, it was a person who had just joined a team that I was on, and it was a peer-to-peer, so it wasn't anybody that I led at the moment. And there was an email signature issue where the email signature was outdated, and they sent an email over. I had never laid eyes on this person. And I found this person. I walked over to them and I said, hey, hi, I'm Keisha. Nice to meet you. Okay, great. I got your email. And by the way, I just wanted to let you know that this email signature is out of date. And so again, it's a perspective. I see the email signature. I have knowledge that this is not the one that we're currently using. And instead of saying, well, I don't know them, so I'm just going to let them send it out 50,000 more times until I build a relationship, I was able to go and let them know. And guess what? The person was appreciative, and me and the person are good friends to this day. And so I think it just really is that, don't tell yourself that story, but actually think about, what is the benefit if I tell this person this? And then what is the downfall if I don't? Because the person just joining the company, they want to do the right thing. So they want their email signature to be what it should be. And so just outside of that situation, really thinking through, what are the benefits if I honor this person with the truth? And then what are the downfalls? And a lot of times we'll see there's a lot more benefits to actually saying something.
Exactly. And that insight, it helps to build relationship. Because in any business setting, any personal setting, knowing that this is someone who's going to say something if something is off or something needs to be improved or enhanced, it builds a sense of trust that comes with it. So it's like, it's almost like pick your path again, because it comes down to, do you have to say something about everything that you see? Absolutely not.
Right.
Does it benefit you if you say things about certain things? Absolutely it does, because it shows that, okay, this is somebody who I can trust, that's going to tell me about myself, that's going to tell me about this initiative that can be better, or about this company, this organization, whatever the case may be. And it's something that you can ultimately use to your advantage. So if you think about, okay, I need to pick a team to go out and accomplish this thing, whatever the thing may be, would you rather have somebody that's just straight up go with the flow, or would you have somebody that's going to not only go with the flow, but it's going to have eyes out, looking left, looking right, looking high, looking low, for ways to improve and ways to get better? It's something that you can use to your advantage.
Yeah, and then when I think about a team, I want my team to be a diverse team. And diversity can mean so many different things because we're so unique as individuals. But what I want to show up in those spaces and in those conversations is a diverse perspective. Because I can only think as much as I can think, but that's one of the things I preach about our team, our partnership, is that we are very different. And I think on the surface, I think on the surface, people think that we're very similar, but we're actually very different, and the way we approach things are very different. And so when there's a problem, we don't come at it from one thought process and one approach. We come at it from multiple angles, and I think it helps us to solve problems a lot better. And sometimes it's like, how do we meet in the middle? What's the compromise? But at least we have considered what's on the other side of this hand, right? And so now we're able to say, we are making the best decision because. So when it comes to giving feedback, if you are in a space and that diverse perspective is truly valuable and valued, if you are not sharing your perspective, then it's that groupthink. And groupthink is really just everyone is in the same room thinking the same thing and no one is speaking up to say anything differently. And groupthink can happen for lots of different reasons, but you want to be able to move things forward, projects and all those things, because you should. And there's a phrase, I don't know, I might mess it up, but it says, if everyone is saying the same thing, then no one's thinking. And so really being able to say, okay, I'm in this space, and we talked about that with presence. I'm in this space for a reason. What do I see? And how can I bring it up in a way that's going to add value to this conversation and not take away from the conversation?
Yep. No, that's true. And I love the diversity play. And also it's important to know, regardless of your level of diversity or demographic, whatever the case may be, by you being there, you have something to bring to the table.
Yeah.
So when it comes to feedback, it doesn't matter if someone has more or less education. It doesn't matter, because sometimes those things can naturally be intimidating. You say, okay, well, this person has been doing this thing or been with this organization for many more years than I have. Nope. This person does not have your experience and your makeup. There's value in that. It could be education, it could be experience, it could be background, age, whatever the case may be, gender, you name it. If you are there, and I'm talking about going back to presence, whatever the case may be, you have something to bring to that table. you have feedback that you can't offer that is value. I don't care how intimidating it may seem. I don't care how much. It could be someone that is a leader's leader. If you have perspective to give,
yes,
you can give that perspective, but it also comes back down to if it's something that you ultimately care about. Yep. So let's talk about this. So we talked about the giving the feedback and the best type, being direct, being authentic, being sincere, taking advantage of that diverse perspective. How can we butcher the feedback, or what's like the worst type of feedback would you say you can give?
So I think that when people say direct, they're sometimes misunderstanding what that looks like. And so I know you have a strong understanding of it, but I think for most people it means straight between the eyes, give it to me, hurt my feelings a little bit. I want to cry, right? I want to cry inside when you give this feedback. And direct feedback doesn't mean that it's mean. Doesn't mean that it's mean-spirited. It doesn't mean that it's lacking empathy. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that it's clear. So when I walk away from this conversation, I know where we stand. I know what I need to work towards to get to the ultimate goal. So let's just level set on direct feedback. So I agree, based on that, direct feedback is amazing. Clear feedback that I know where I stand when I walk away from it. Worst case scenario for me.
Let me tap into that.
Yeah.
I want you to go to that worst case scenario. I want to make sure we catch that. It's almost like I could define it as free from fluff.
Free from fluff.
Free from fluff. Just like you mentioned earlier, like, hey, how are you? Cool, great. How was your day was great. That's fantastic. Oh, you look nice today. Excellent. Hey, just want to tell you have you looked in the mirror lately? No? Really? Mirror, you might want to. That's fine. You're saying all that to tell me I got spinach in my teeth.
So you like people to get to the point.
That's a lot of.
That's different to me from direct.
Really?
So yes.
Let's talk it out.
Because get to the point. Where's the substance and the meat of the conversation, right? I think that is important to define. So that's get to the point. But direct means, again, knowing where you stand. And so you might have people who can be very fluffy, but that could be their way of building your rapport, right? And so that could be hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Nice, I'm glad to see you. You look amazing.
Fluffy.
So let's talk about such and such. So I think that there's a way to warm up the conversation, but still walk away from that conversation knowing exactly where you stand and where your action items are. And so I know I'm a DISC nerd, so I love DISC. If you're not familiar with that, it's a personality assessment that talks through how you communicate. And so based on your style, you need that quick communication where it's gonna be, hey, get to the point, this, and that. I don't necessarily need the fluff either, but at the end of the day, I feel like that's the person who's giving the feedback. I feel like it's more for them. So we talked about that narrative that we tell ourselves, and we get nervous and we start getting in those situations like, oh my gosh, Mike's gonna yell at me if I say that he has spinach in his teeth. We get into that. And so we try to make ourselves more comfortable so that we can ease in, because we don't know how you're gonna take it. And so I think that is why. But at the end of the day, again, just the clarity of the communication. So I can see some overlaps with it.
Yeah.
But I want people to know that direct doesn't mean you just gotta wake up and just bark at people to have direct communication.
That's true. That's a benefit. It's different perspectives.
Yeah.
Because I see that you could be direct. That doesn't mean be rude or barking. But it also is important to know while giving it, are you talking to somebody that sees the, hey, how you doing and all that?
For
Some
sure.
people might be saying, hey, this is a fluff session. And you're like, because if you're giving that to me, go ahead, let's do it. Hey, give me how you doing?
How you doing?
Fluff radar is going off.
Really? The whole time?
Fluff radar is high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't ask you how you doing. Is what I got out of that.
Look, spinach in the teeth. Okay, cool. Let's go. We out of here. What's next? what you doing later?
Yeah. And you brought up a good point is when you're giving feedback, knowing how the person likes to receive it. And we are going to dig into receiving feedback quite a bit because we understand how that can help you grow as well. But everybody needs something a little different.
That's true.
And so giving feedback, I think, is just really just having that emotional intelligence, which I know we talked about, to be socially aware, to know what a person typically gives you, right? And so I'll give you just a very quick analogy or example. And so if I have someone who's in a message chat and they say, "Hi, Keisha," and then they like wait to respond to their message, my mind is saying, okay, so good morning, like what we talking about, right?
Right.
But I know to respond to them before I get into meat of the subject with, "Hi, so-and-so," and then I go into my message. So I'm meeting people where they are. When they respond to me in a certain way, I try to find what I'm noticing, and instead of being irritated by it or annoyed by it, I try to meet them where they are. And so if a person is a small talk type, "Good morning, how are you? How you feel? This and that," I'm going to have to stretch myself a little bit more when I'm communicating with them. And not just with feedback, because depending on the thing, you can give a little bit fluff, and sometimes the fluff is just, it feels very not authentic. What's the word? Inauthentic.
Or fake.
Right. So you gotta meet people where they are. What do you think?
Yes, there's okay. I hesitate.
I feel like you're gonna disagree.
Well, I hesitate because you say you got to. You don't have to. You could look, say what you need to say if that's what you choose to do. There's benefits on meeting people where they are.
Yeah,
so I think I get what you're saying.
Because you don't want people to be turned off by the method that you provide the feedback that they don't get the message. Because at the end of the day, the point of you sharing it is for them to receive it.
True.
If you're gonna do something to turn them off, that they can't receive it, then you wasting everybody's time.
So you're talking about that well-designed feedback.
Oh, for sure.
Because it could also, you giving it, let's talk real talk for a minute. It could be like, "Hey, I'm about to let you have it. I'm about to give you a piece of my mind. Either you're gonna receive it or not, but I'm about to give you this. I'm about to give you this feedback play.
Okay.
The play we're running is feedback.
Okay.
Go. I'm gonna speak my mind.
Okay.
Now, do I care? And if it goes back, if I don't care how they receive it, it's like, "Hey, you know what? I just gave them feedback." You say, "Well, how did they take it?" "I don't know, because I left afterwards."
Okay.
So,
but even in a professional or personal setting,
that's unprofessional.
It's unprofessional, professional setting, but there is sometimes people, depending on how they receive it, right? They might say, "You know what? I just got chin checked." Right? That was it. I needed that. It was a wake-up call. But a good number of people, especially in a workplace, professional setting, there's a consequence to that. And so I you know me, I'm a very calculated person. I literally think through every single thing when I say and do, right?
This is where the differences come in because I just react.
This is kind of like, it felt right.
Go for it.
I'll pick up the pieces later. But I do like to think it through. And so I am thinking about that consequence ahead of time.
Right.
And so what I try to do is I try to show up in spaces where I have already thought through who this person is, where is this person in this moment, right? If they had a tragedy or they had a situation happen, am I aware of it? What do I know about this person's situation? What is our relationship like? What are our experiences like? What's the impact of providing this feedback? Right? So is it nitpicky? Like you said, is it just, "Hey, I don't like your hair today"? I'm not going to say that because that's not impactful feedback. But if this is something that I see that is happening that could potentially prevent them from an opportunity, prevent them from something negatively impact their brand, I'm going to go back to that. Okay, let me figure out how they need this packaged so they don't return my message when I send it. Right? And so that is the work that I've had to learn to do over time. But you might have people, you may have that relationship. I mean, there's times when we give each other feedback and it's not fluffy at all. It's just straight up, "Look, I hate your shirt, go change," right? But we have that relationship and we've learned that over time, and it might not be that moment where we need to do that. But then I know that if there's a subject that I'm sensitive about or you sensitive about, I think we both do that emotional work up front.
A lot of times. Sometimes we don't.
Even when it's something sensitive, you think?
If it's something sensitive, I think sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't. It's like, hey, you? It's like, you weren't listening to me, were you? That's why you laugh.
Yeah, this cat.
But it's also something you work on, and just like anything else, it's nothing that it's not perfection.
No,
it's not perfection.
Work.
It's like it's work.
It's work.
Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you miss.
Yeah.
It's like you talking about. I know we were kind of getting into the you were starting talking about that worst kind. There's gonna be moments where you plan it out. Mm-hmm. You've thinking about the relationship. You thinking about the rapport you've built with the person. You've looked to see how this person is wired, and you're like, okay, got it. Feedback, boom. Executed, delivery, well received, spark change. Great. But there's also gonna be times where you come in and you might miss the mark. You might end up saying something that may not have, it may have triggered the person, and maybe you didn't intend to it. But it's something that we can, constantly work on, constantly be aware on.
Yeah.
And so I want to keep going into the layer of that worst type. So obviously the good stuff, we talked about that. In a lot of cases, the worst is the flip of that. But let's go back into like that worst, the feedback where it's like, you know what? That wasn't it right there. Mm-hmm. What's the ones that when you see it, you're like, I don't know about that.
I think giving feedback from a reactive space. So, with our son, it happens a lot more than probably in the workplace, because I've done so much work to build up a professional response and a professional way to provide feedback. With him, that first 2 times you tell him to pick his socks off the floor, it's like, son, I would really appreciate if you would pick the socks off the floor. That 3rd time, it's reactive. It's coming from a place of I am triggered into my response. And now I'm going to tell him to get them socks off the floor, right? And there's no fluff, and it's mean. It's not direct, right? And so I would say that happens quite often. Not so much in the workplace, but I'm sure there's probably times in the workplace where you got to really push back that eye roll. You got to really, your heart is starting to race. And so in those moments, a lot of times I will pause and think and act. So sometimes it's an email and you want to just get back on that keyboard and just let it go. Furthermore, by the way, per my last email, you want to get it all in.
Right.
But really just kind of like that step away. And then a lot of times I'll come to you and I'm just like, I'm saying what I wish I could say.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would definitely say worst way to give feedback that I've seen and I've also experienced personally is when it's reactive, when I'm triggered into the feedback, when I don't take that time to take that pause. What about you?
No, that's good. I think I totally agree with that. Another thing is being aware of the time component as well. So I think it's important to definitely take that pause so that you are making sure that you're coming across in a way that you want to come across. There's also making sure that pause is not too extended.
Oh, like timely?
Yeah, so let's say for instance, if you got something happen and you waiting a couple weeks.
Don't you come with me with no.
It's like, but then it goes back to that trust factor. It's like, like that was how long ago?
Now I'm all set.
Yeah, that's I've made that mistake.
Yeah,
I've been on both ends of that. As far as like you hearing it, it's like we talking about old stuff. Like that's I've changed my life up since then, or it is what it is. So I've been there before. As far as that's been my reaction to it. Also, I've given that before. Then you give it like, dang, yeah, this is kind of old. So it goes to show, just like let's just. I know we're on this spinach in the teeth example for a minute. Imagine I see you next week and like, hey, heads up. When I saw you last week, you ever get that spinach out your teeth? Like it's still up in there. Do like this.
Oh, I know you like spinach.
Exactly. It's like you love some spinach. Like what you talking about? You like spinach. So it's old, so it doesn't have that same impact. It doesn't have that same value.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean all the time not say anything. It really depends on the situation. Is especially if you see the thing recurring.
Yeah.
Okay, you might need to say something, but being timely with it is also so important. Yeah.
So I was going to add worst feedback. Way to give it. I just thought of this is in front of other people. There's a time and a place. Now, it might be something where, the time, it's a lesson for everyone. So this is a time designated where we are going to share feedback or something like that. But you ever have a situation where someone gives you some bad news and you can't hear? It's like you're so focused on the thing that it was just said, all the other words kind of like go mute.
Right.
And so imagine you're in front of all your peers and you're like living your best life, and another peer or leader or someone says to you something and you feel embarrassed. It could be the most valuable piece of feedback that you could ever receive, but it's hard for you to receive it because it's embarrassing and you have your physiological response to it. So when giving feedback, it should be something that whenever possible is private. It's something that it can be conversational, because the last thing that someone wants to do when giving me feedback is not seek to understand, not try to understand my perspective and my point of view and start leading with assumption. Well, you did this, tell me why, or why did you do this? Like, please don't start my feedback with why did you do something. I'm getting triggered because you don't even know if I did it, right? So let's talk about it and let it be a conversation. And I could be receptive of any piece of feedback that you want to give me, just as long as I feel like it's a conversation. But if we're going to have a conversation on that level, it ain't got nothing to do with nobody else. So I don't need witnesses, right? It could just be you and I. We could just go take a walk. We can get on a call. We could just, like we do, have a one-on-one conversation versus it being in front of an audience.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
That's true. That's true. I think it goes back to understanding who you're giving it to.
You like your feedback in public?
I mean, it depends on what it is. It's like, hey, if it's something I can take and roll with, fine. You got to be aware, because I think there's a time and place. There's a time and place depending on what the content is. If it could embarrass, that's something you want to have on a one-on-one conversation. But because sometimes like feedback has different levels to it. It's like, okay, you have this. It could be this severe thing that say, hey, I have feedback on the way that you're presenting yourself. And that could be very personal.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe depending on that, it may not be like, all right, cool, this is something that it could be a one-on-one deal. But there's also be something that is a bit more minor. And that's feedback as well. Say, hey, be on the lookout for this. And that might be something that you can kind of dish out there if it's in public. It all depends. I think it depends on the severity, depends on the content, depends on the person. Those different things got to be taken in consideration. So you mentioned, I want to ask you a question, because you mentioned when you're like in a room with peers and that sort of thing. How do you feel about in, let's say, a professional setting where you have the opportunity to provide feedback to peers? So these are people when y'all on the same level.
Yeah.
Y'all on the exact same level. This is not your leader. You're not their leader.
Yeah.
Giving feedback to peers. Why should somebody care?
Lit.
Y'all both there to do a job. Why should somebody care about that?
So for me, it is, I care about them as a person. And so I am seeing something and something crosses my mind, and I know that it probably crosses the minds of others. And so I want to be able to let them know what my thoughts are, my perspective, what I'm experiencing as a result of the thing, so that it can help them to be aware. Right. And feedback, listen, you might get it and you might be like, this ain't for me. I might, I bless you for sharing this, but I'm gonna put this on the shelf. And that's fine in a lot of cases. And so, but I want that awareness to be there. And if I care about the person, especially, I want to show them that, hey, this is something that I've noticed. Keep an eye on it. Right. It might have been a one-off. It might be, no one else might not ever think it. But just to bring it to your attention, keep an eye on it, be aware, so that I'm not just thinking it, but I'm also giving them a different way to look at it. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's anybody can, and it doesn't mean like you have to be like, oh, I'm giving feedback. Oh, I'm this big and bad person who's just going to say whatever comes to mind and this, that, and the other. It like you said, it shows a level of care about the person, the situation. So I think it's just kind of like when you're giving the feedback, you can think. I think, like you said, you can read too much into it. It's like, oh, this person's like, this is my peer. I mean, I'm not their leader. They're not my leader. This is the case may be. It's okay. It's whoever. And a lot of times too, there's other factors that goes into that. And this is something we really didn't get into as far as like the environment of the space that we're in. So I know we've been in different, working with different organizations, different people, this sort of thing. And you could be in an environment of feedback where things are free flowing, but also if you're in an environment where feedback isn't a thing, it may make things that much more challenging. So I believe, and I think that transitions where when you're talking to peers, there's value there. Because even when you look at it from that level, would you rather for even in our leadership experience, I'm sure we both heard like, you probably rather not hear some things from a leader, right? You probably wouldn't look at it that way. But also if you say, hey, I got somebody who's a colleague of mine who I could trust that's going to tell me something that could help me get better, it builds a level of respect there. So how do you feel about providing feedback to leadership, providing feedback to those that you report to?
Can I go back to the peer one real quick? Yeah. You say this all the time, but I think peer feedback goes to what are your goals, right? If your goal is to be an expert doer, a subject matter expert, a go-to person on your team, and you're helping people who are new to the team, you can't help them without giving them feedback, right? They're going to join the team and not know anything about the role. And it's your responsibility as that go-to or that mentor or that person that's helping train them in their role to say, this is wrong, or this is the way that this needs to be done in this role. But if you have a goal to become a leader, that was probably first time around in leadership, one of my biggest opportunities was the feedback. So I mentioned that I would provide feedback when my leader told me to, or I was so uncomfortable with providing it that my team couldn't grow the way that they needed to grow because I wasn't saying the things that I needed to say. And so fast forward to my journey, and just learning the importance of feedback, knowing what it felt like for me not to get feedback that could help me grow, and really just digging and sinking my teeth into what feedback looks like for each person that I interact with. I think it helped me to move more smoothly into leadership because at that point it was like, I had grown the skill and built the muscle of providing feedback, whether it's to my peer or to my leader. And so people know me to know that I'm gonna see something, say something person. And I'm not gonna let anybody that I'm around fail whenever possible. I'm gonna do whatever I can to help lift them up. And if a person is aspiring to be a leader, you can't just say, well, I'm gonna give feedback and help mentor or coach or grow people once I become a leader, because that switch doesn't easily flip. Right. And then you have to learn it while you're learning so many other things about leadership. And so I would definitely say if a person is aspiring for leadership, or even if they want to be that go-to person on their role, they have to build that skill.
Totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. It's something that it goes back to, like, it's something that you can really use to your advantage. You can use to your advantage. So if you think about the two paths, if you say, hey, I have someone that I'm looking to promote someone into this leadership position, and the education is the same, the experience is the same, the tenure with the company or organization is exactly the same, all those things are the same, but this one person has experience giving feedback in a thoughtful, professional fashion, and this person does not have that skill set, more than likely this person that has that skill set of providing the feedback is going to get that spot.
For sure.
Yep. So we were talking before, and that feedback, I think that ties in general. That ties to peers, that ties to leadership. Do you think the approach needs to change at all when you're talking about giving feedback to leaders? Because that could be intimidating. It could be intimidating. You say, okay, this person has been promoted for whatever reason. Who am I to give that person some feedback?
Listen, that person lead me. So they can be promoted for a lot of things, but they leading me. And you got to teach people how to lead you, right? You have to You have to communicate what your needs are. You have to let them know what your expectations are. And that's one of the things I ask all of my team members, what are your expectations for me, right? Like, what is the thing that you need from me as your leader? And so I need to let them know what I'm working on as far as the things I want the feedback around. But I also want them, if they see me jacking something up, to tell me, right? And if they're not giving me the feedback that I need or the way that I need it, I need to communicate and articulate that. And I think that it's called leading up, right? It is the communication to your leader to let them know the things that you need or the ideas that you have for the team or how to grow the team or how to make the team better. And I think that if we get caught in that, well, this is my leader thought, then how can your leader effectively lead you if you put it all on them to be a mind reader as far as what you need? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. Yeah, it's you're right. I like what you said as far as that person is leading me. Mm-hmm. So that goes with taking advantage of your career.
Yeah.
That goes with taking advantage of your career, taking control of your career, having that ownership stake in your career, not allowing others to lead that for you.
Yeah.
Now it comes with a support system because you're going to need support. You know, family, friends, those that you work with, mentors, whatever the case may be. You need that support there. But also when it comes down to like, okay, this is a need that I have, you have to help that person to be able to help you. So when you're talking about like giving feedback, this for the make sure the audience is very clear. Like this goes for anybody. Anybody you're working with should be a recipient of that because, again, you bring this unique perspective to the table. Mm-hmm. And no one's exempt from that.
Yeah, I remember my very first time in a professional setting out of college. And I had a leader that she told me after about 9 months in a row that she was taking my reports and fixing them. And I had to give her feedback that's not helpful for me because I'm not learning the things that are wrong with these reports before I'm sending them over. And so that's an example of leading up. I think that people think that it has to be this big thing that you're doing when you're providing your leader with feedback. We were having a conversation. Feedback and perspective sharing is a conversation. Mm-hmm. I see this, you see that. I see this side of the hand, you see that side of the hand. And so when she told me that this was what she was seeing, I let her know the impact on me. Mm-hmm. Right. And the impact, I promise you, when I left there, I did not know how to do my job. I was just basically circling boxes and just, I thought because I didn't get any feedback from her until that moment, I thought everything was fine because I didn't know enough to ask for it. And so I was just like, well, no news must be good news. And then I just went in that direction. But I didn't grow. And she didn't grow until she was able to find out that that's what I needed from her. And so I definitely think that you have to, speak up, say the things. And just keep it in real talk. Not every leader provides that safe space in that environment where you feel comfortable saying the thing that you want to say. But my biggest philosophy, if that person won't listen, find someone who will. And if that's their leader, if that's another leader in a different area, because I'm not going to stop growing just because this person has a deficiency in how to lead me. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to stop growing because this person doesn't know how to lead me or doesn't ask how to lead me. Right. And so I'm going to do whatever I need to do in that space, and that's worked out for me. But I definitely think that leading up is a thing because they're people too, right? Just because they have a title doesn't mean that they know everything, especially when it comes to you.
Totally agree. So let's do this. We talked about what feedback is, and again, you mentioned it. It's not. It can be, and sometimes it is this severe conversation. It could be this groundbreaking revelation that's being expressed. It could be, but like you said, it could also be a conversation. It could be something that may be just very minor, and it's just sharing. Hey, I want to make sure I share my perspective. I share this thought. I share this insight. So we talked about all those things. So when it's all said and done, we talked about the feedback to the peers. We talked about feedback to leaders, providing feedback upwards and that sort of thing. Let's bring it back with some best practices. So what are some of those? Let's go back into the best practices for giving feedback.
So I'm a big believer in that I have to feel heard. I have to feel heard. You know that. Like, we'll go back and forth, and I'm like, but do you hear what I'm saying? Right. Do you understand what I mean? Right? But I like to make sure that whatever I'm providing feedback to someone or giving feedback or having a courageous conversation is that person has an opportunity to feel heard, which is why I don't provide feedback in email or writing whenever possible. I have a phone conversation or face-to-face conversation so that it can be conversational and it can feel heard. The next piece I'll build off of with that is intent versus impact. Mm-hmm. So if you're not familiar with that phrase, intent versus impact. So the intentions that I had behind the thing that I did, whether it was I just wanted to do a new activity or I just wanted to help the team out by building this widget, it could be something like that. But the impact might not match that. Mm-hmm. And so the impact might be things blow up, people are uncomfortable, people feel like this was unproductive. So I had this great intent, this positive intent, this positive thing that I wanted to do, but the impact of it was I jacked up something. Mm-hmm. And so in that conversation, acknowledging the intent that the person has can go a long way. Mm-hmm. So even just leading with, I can't use the spinach and the teeth example for this, mm-hmm. but let's say you burnt some tacos. Mm-hmm. For me just to say, you burnt the tacos, now we don't have dinner, you jacked it up. Mike, I appreciate you making the tacos. I know it's something that you really wanted to do for the family today, and you took time out of your busy schedule, but we can't eat this. So I think just acknowledging the intent, and when I say intent, I also like to acknowledge the work that somebody put into something, mm-hmm. the time, the effort, the energy that they put into it, and then you can offer that piece of what that impact looks like so that they understand, although you meant well, now we don't have nothing to eat. Mm-hmm. And so we have to find something else and we have to go out and buy food and so forth. And so intent versus impact and making sure people are heard. What about you?
Got it. I'm going to say the feedback best practices is for it to be FAT. F-A-T. F-A-T is a quick acronym. And we just talked about it. So the one is the fluff. Is to be aware of the fluff. There's time where you may need to layer it, set the tone, make sure you build that rapport.
So we can use fluff sometimes when we give you feedback.
Hey, be how you be, but be aware. I like that. Be how you be, but be aware. Okay. So just be mindful if it's like if it's fluffy. We talk. There's some I work with. We use that term a lot. It's like that was a bunch of fluff. So just be aware to make sure you're not coming across in that way. Mm-hmm. It's okay to set the tone and establish that rapport, but just be aware if that person might be looking like, hey, I need you to really get to the point. So be aware of the fluff. The A is to make sure you're being authentic. Make sure you're being authentic and make sure you're being sincere when you are coming across. So that could be being aware of the relationship or the rapport you've built with that person. Or be aware of the fact that maybe you don't know this person that well, but if anything, make sure you're being authentic and make sure you're coming from that sincere spot. Then the last piece is the T, is to be aware of the timeliness behind it. Be aware of the timeless. Like, are you talking about something that happened last month? Are you talking about something that happened a couple of weeks ago? Or you might say, hey, you know what? I'm going to make time and make this thing as important because I'm going to tell you real time when it happens. Mm-hmm. Because you also got it, and that doesn't mean if it happened a while ago, you don't say anything about it, but there's benefit in being intentional about when you say something and how far along it happened. So those are a couple of best practices. So our last question of the day, we talked a lot about, we probably could have gone on and on about giving feedback, is how can we really use feedback in a tangible fashion to help our professional careers? Even personal as well.
Oh, personal.
Yep. How does it open up doors?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit ago, but for me, it really was showing up in spaces the way that I want to show up so that I could open the doors, right? And so what's my brand looking like? If I want to be a leader, how can I lead now? What does leading look like in this current role that I'm in? And for me, it was giving feedback. It was really becoming in tune with the people around me, being concerned and aware and really focused on their growth and development and not just head down and focused on what do I have in front of me, but also looking at the people around me and like, what are their goals and how can I help them reach them? And if there is something that I see, like, what are some things that I could say? And I will also say feedback, folks, it's not just the courageous feedback. We talked about that this entire time, but it's also letting people know the things that they're doing really, really well as well. And so if I see something amazing, I tell them specifically what I see that's amazing. And if I see something constructive, I tell them specifically the thing that I think can improve. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that I started to really build in my last role. I believe it opened up doors in my current role because I started to notice that people would give me more feedback because I openly gave it. And so it was just kind of like that relationship was built. And so nobody left me out on the island to just, sink or swim. But people would say, hey, Keisha, that's not the right way to do that. Or how about this? Or have you considered? And then I was able to grow as a result of the people around me. So I would definitely say, know what those goals are. And then if that makes sense for you to provide that feedback, I love how you brought up, it might not be the culture of your job or your workplace, but if it is a piece of who your company is or what's recognized there, thinking about like, how can you start? Where's the place to start? Maybe it's a project that I'm working on and I'm taking a little extra time at the end of the night to fix something. Mm-hmm. Maybe just setting up a meeting to talk through and understand someone else's perspective, have that conversation as far as why they handle a particular project the way that they do, so that you don't resent them because you stay in at work to work late every single night. Mm-hmm. So I think really just awareness, really just thinking through your goals and really thinking about how can I show up where I am, bloom where I'm planted, mm-hmm. so that when I move to the next phase, that I'm already building and growing in that skill versus all of a sudden I have to flip a switch.
Yes. When you said the piece, and this is the piece that I had to work on and still working on it to this day, about making sure taking out time to also provide that intentional feedback on the good. Mm-hmm. Thought that was brilliant, because a lot of times, especially in a fast-paced environment, you may not. For some, like me, it took some extra work to say, hey, let me call out this good thing. Mm-hmm. Hey, that thing was done very well.
Yeah.
And I got into a habit now, before, it was, hey, this is something that need to be fixed. Let's fix. Mm-hmm. You need to fix this.
Focus on the fix.
Focus on the fix so we can move forward. But also, I love that you said that, taking time out to provide feedback and shout out to the good as well. Mm-hmm. So, but to the point about opening doors, we talked about it earlier. It's if you say, hey, is this something, if someone has this skill set of providing feedback on the good, providing feedback on the opportunity, the thing that need to be improved upon. If you take a person that has this skill set versus a person that does not have this skill set, a lot of times that opportunity, that door is going to be opened up faster or wider from the person that has that skill set. Mm-hmm. So again, just like we talked about, being intentional and being aware and leveraging our diversity, all those things, having that trait of one who's going to give that feedback is going to work to their advantage, for sure, career-wise. Yeah. So good info, good content there, right?
Yeah.
You got any feedback for me right here? Just save it for private. But look, y'all, we hope you enjoyed that. We talked a lot about giving feedback. So we're going to ask you to do two things for us pertaining to feedback. One, we're going to challenge you to go out and give someone feedback. Go out and give someone feedback and report back to us as far as like how that went for you, what that experience was like, what did you hear in return. Also, we want you to give us some feedback. So we ask you to comment, how was this episode? How was this podcast? Give us some feedback on how it helped or some things that you may have wanted to see different about giving feedback. But also, we want to encourage everybody to make sure you take the giving of feedback and add it to your personal and your professional brand. I'm going to ask you to do one more thing for us. Please like the Woods Collab podcast. Please subscribe to the Woods Collab podcast. That's like 3 things so far.
And make sure
keep asking for stuff. And make sure you share this link with your friends, your family, your personal and your professional network. Feedback. Let's give it. This is Keisha. I'm Mike Woods. This is the Woods Collab podcast. Until next time. Peace.